quickly going to summarize some of the key problems and issues with jobs and livelihood. Essentially, we're talking of three mismatches when it comes to livelihood and jobs. One is aspiration. People want government jobs and there are not enough of them. We know that. And people don't want to go to the private sector, and there are different reasons for that. That's one of the mismatches. Second mismatch is a wage mismatch. Okay, industry talks of the minimum wage, but if you look at aspirants, they want a living wage. They can't articulate that, but essentially they want something more than what's minimum. So there's a wage mismatch. And finally, there's a geographical mismatch. You know, India has supplier states and demand states. There's supply of labor in the east, central India, and the jobs are in the south, west, parts of North India, right? So there's a geographical mismatch. So jobs really don't come to you, you have to go to the jobs. So broadly, these are the three issues, deeply structural issues in India's job market. And Mr. Mahajan says it's a demographic disappointment. All these three issues leads to a demographic disappointment. My question would be what we can do to make sure it doesn't become a demographic disaster, right? Mr. Mahajan, would you want to start with that? And I will go to the next panel.
Well, I use the word demographic disappointment in the context of the oft-used phrase demographic dividend. And in fact, the phrase that I used was demographic dividend declared but not paid. So it's a, you know, it's, but to get to, I mean, I think all of us have a reasonable diagnosis with or without a sense of the specific numbers about what is the problem. It's a humongous problem, right? Hundreds of millions of people, all of that. So what are the suggestions that I have? Given that human resources cannot overnight be moved from a certain skill level to significantly higher skill levels. I mean, my favorite example is someone who is doing weeding in a field as a primary outside work outside the home. She cannot overnight become a call center operator or even a software writer, right? It's actually the latter, maybe an intergenerational change, you know, which means that her daughter might do it, but it's very unlikely. We'll of course have some stories, but it's unlikely. So then what we need to do is find proximate opportunities. And by proximate, I mean both physically, where the people are, as well as not too far from their current skill endowments, or at least their potential to acquire some skills. The very basis of livelihoods, particularly in rural India, is the triad Jal, Jangal, Zameen. You know, land including soil, Zameen, forests. Forests not only because of the trees and the timber and all of that, but because they are really the repository of the entire ecosystem. And Jal, which actually emerges out of the forest. So forests are critical for the overall health of the ecosystem. Unfortunately, and I won't go into this specific details, but there's a lot of data available. There's a massive degradation of the natural resource base of India's livelihoods. Now, this is a fantastic opportunity because a woman who knows how to do weeding also knows how to do nursery planting, how to plant trees, how to take care of trees. She knows a lot about the natural environment. A lot of it may be tacit knowledge. It may not be something in which she'll pass an exam in botany, but she knows a lot. So if we have to invest as a nation for our own health, we need to invest, I have a separate paper on it, between 2 to 3% of our GDP for the next 5 to 7 years. That's roughly about 2 lakh crores a year, double of roughly what the Narega outlay was in the last record year. 2 lakh crores a year to restore the natural resources, Jal, Jangal, Zameen. And if we do that, it will generate a large number of jobs for those who are so-called unskilled, who are rural, and who have very few other alternatives. So green jobs are actually the short-term savior, but in the long run, what it will do in about 5 years, and I myself have worked in hundreds of such watersheds, from places where the wells were dry, the bore wells had gone completely dry. In about 3 to 5 years of watershed development work, you can restore the entire place. The groundwater regime, the vegetation, the cropping, everything improves. So in about 5 years' time, this investment in natural resources will also generate long-term productive agricultural diversification opportunities, which is the next frontier that they can graduate. And then in the meantime, the surpluses should be used to invest in what I'm sure Madhav will talk about, which is education and skills. And then intergenerationally, in about 10 years' time, we will have hopefully that woman's daughter uh, as a software engineer. You know, so there is a strategy, but we have to go about it systematically and step by step. Thank you.
I'm going to come back on the financing part of the money you just spoke about, of the budget that's required every year you spoke about. But I will go to Mrs. Govil, and if you could talk a little bit about low women's labor force participation rate, right? What is causing that, and what are your ideas to sort of improve that going ahead? Because that's a huge gap, whether you talk of rural India or even urban India, right? And there are different reasons why women's labor force participation dropping in both these areas. But overall, what would be your suggestions?
Everyone knows that we are facing a conundrum that India has one of the lowest labor force participation rates for women. But when you look at the labor force participation in the rural and urban areas in the lower income states like Madhya Pradesh, for example, as since I'm working in Madhya Pradesh, I'll use that as as an example I'm more intimately familiar with. Um, Women are working, but they are underemployed. They're working on the farms. They are working in part-time jobs, but they are underemployed. So that is a major problem, that even if you have labor force participation, is it remunerative enough to give them a decent standard of life? But then, of course, then the problem is that what is the supportive infrastructure that the state government gives in? What is it that when I'm saying we, since I'm working for the state government, I identify myself as a civil servant, as the role of the policy responses to to the challenge of enabling women more gainful work. So we can't directly create jobs. There's a limitation, the budgetary limitation. As Mr. Mahajan said, we would all love that the outlay on Narega, on rehabilitating forests and Jal Jangan Zameen was 3 times, 4 times, 10 times what it was now. But that's not the reality in front of us. So the supportive policy interventions which can come in from the government side in terms of giving women safe schooling, accessibility to schooling, to educational opportunities, giving them child care facilities, giving them self-entrepreneurial sort of support in terms of skilling, in terms of access to finance. All this is happening. But then again, I'll go to Mr. Mahajan's point. It's too little, it's too less, it's too far in between. And it's so therefore there comes the lack of capacity of the state and the role of civil society organizations to help us bridge that gap and to be able to access women where they want the support from the government, where they want the support from not just government but from formal financial institutions, and to be able to give them that kind of access to whether it is formal finances, or if it is skill sets, or it is markets, or it is backward and forward linkages towards towards their entrepreneurial ventures, which we have to basically create that ecosystem in a very sort of a holistic fashion. So now, let me come to a small town like in Madhya Pradesh. Increasingly with nuclear families, the old structure where a woman could have the child being taken care of, that has gone away now. So now with the new nuclear families having come in, the joint families have gone. Sorry, the nuclear families having coming in everywhere. We find everywhere, even within formal structures, we find women struggling to keep on with the jobs. So while in the Western economies you had opt-out revolutions where women opted out of the workforce to take care of childcare activities for, well, they were called soccer moms and all that. That doesn't apply to us really. But over here, our women have no other choice because the childcare activity responsibilities, they have no other option. So that is also a factor where the the state can come in a bigger way. But as I said, again, I'll be repeating myself, but then I'll say that the state then needs to come in where the private funding is shy, private funding is limited, private options are not there, and so we need much more of public presence in such spaces.
So in the example that you just cited, ma'am, where does the state come in? It's not very clear. For instance, when it's a nuclear family, right, and you have a childbearing woman,
Yeah,
are
so
you talking
suppose
of
you have
creche?
Anganwadi, centers where you have like a 9 to 12. So Anganwadi centers being more than feeding centers. So, the Anganwadi center becomes a creche where a woman can leave the child in a safe atmosphere, say from morning till evening, go and find gainful work and be sure that the child's early education needs as well as nutrition needs are taken care of. So is that is a gap which is there everywhere, which perhaps maybe the women in this room who've had child caring, responsibilities have faced themselves. We've all faced it. I can be privileged enough to have domestic help to take care of my child when my children were growing up, but not everyone can have that. So therefore families decide, it's an economic decision. It's a decision that you stay home because somebody has to take care of the child.
So another issue with falling labor force participation, migration is a reality, and when our blue collar workforce particularly migrate to cities, they're often pushed to living in slums, right? And the reason is we don't have great worker housing in India, right? And that's not very comfortable to families that see their women migrate, and that leads to a lot of attrition in the industry. Is there something the state can do on worker housing when women migrate, say, from villages to bigger cities within the state?
Where's the money?
All right, so that's the gap. There's no money for worker housing.
Yeah. I mean, we would love to have flatted complexes, etc., where people can come and live and work, but we don't have resources for that. So eventually, when you have a certain amount of a budget, you have to prioritize. And where we are struggling to say that we need to put more money in our schools, we need to put fans, we need to put benches in our schools. There, the thought of giving flats or worker housing takes a backseat because there are so many other pressing demands in front of the state which don't, which merit more attention uh, to uh, to the policymakers.
Right. Okay. Great. Uh, I'll come to you, Mr. Chavan, and could you take us through what are the interventions that our education system currently needs so that our workforce, including women, both men and women, are better prepared for some of the jobs of the future that we have been talking about?
What is our workforce? I mean, these are questions, every time you say a word, you got to raise more questions. What do you mean by our workforce? This whole idea of education
Yeah.
came up as the industrial revolution started picking. Actually, it was before. But the idea was for industry, we should need workforce. And so people have to be educated to be able to work in the industry and so on. That is how it started. And even today, I mean, this zameen jangal jal, jal zameen jal jangal zameen, ulta bol raha hu main. So this philosophy, if you take, does our school system do anything about jal jangal and zameen? Nothing, zero. There is some EVS lesson or something, but kids coming from agricultural communities, which is everywhere, they are not taught. Forget techniques in agriculture, they're not even taught to respect agriculture. And this is where we see parents coming to us and saying, आप लोग पढ़ाते तो हो, लेकिन ये तो बाप को बाप नहीं बोलता है. So what is this? What kind of a school is this? This school doesn't teach the children to respect their parents. Now, when you want a workforce, what you want human capital workforce for what? So it is traditionally believed that ये work अगर आप तो स्कूल में जाओगे, 10वीं पास करोगे, 12वीं पास करोगे, कॉलेज में जाओगे, and then you will get jobs. And now more and more kids are finding out that that is not true. Nobody is saying it aloud. And it has nothing to do with politics. It has nothing to do with political parties. People just know now कि पढ़ाई करने पर भी ये नौकरी तो नहीं मिलने वाली. आप मुझे पढ़ाओगे. There are young people from Manzil Mystics here. What about music? If you teach music, will people get jobs? Now, when I was growing up, people used to tell me, cricket खेल के नौकरी थोड़ी मिलेगी. आप जाके पूछो, IPL में क्या भाव चलता है. So kabaddi खेल के भी पैसा मिलता है. So first of all those things have changed. Lot of things are changing, and so we have to take a very close look at what we believe is education. And that education, fundamental problem, intervention तो छोड़ो एक तरफ, fundamental problem is हम लोग education वो उसको समझते हैं जो स्कूल में मिलता है, और जो स्कूल में नहीं मिलता उसको हम education नहीं समझते हैं. Actually असल में ऐसा हो रहा है कि स्कूल के बाहर ही सारा education ज़्यादा चल रहा है. And I can tell you numerous stories about this. और वो that, so if you need human capital, you need workforce, for what is the first question you must ask, and are we doing that or not doing that? Now, is this education for jobs and jobs alone, or is there something else that is going to happen? Self-respect. वो बच्चों को आत्मसम्मान मिलता है क्या? अगर मैं स्कूल पास करता हूँ, 12वीं पास करता हूँ, तो does the society respect me? It used to be true. लेकिन आजकल लोग बोलते 12वीं तो हर कोई पास हो रहा है यार, तूने कौन सा बड़ा तीर मारा है. So in old Hindi films, the hero used to come running to his mother and say, माँ मैं BA पास हो गया. अब कोई पूछता भी नहीं है. So I think we have to understand, redefine education. We have to start looking at people in the vocational training program that we run. There's a program for recognition of prior learning. The entire country, and I would say that 90% of our workforce has worked and learned to work on the job.
Right. Yeah.
और उसका कोई recognition नहीं है, उसका कोई certification नहीं है. We are doing vocational training, but there is no premium. किसी ने certificate अगर ले लिया है, तो that doesn't mean you're going to get 5%, 10% more in salaries. So we are not respecting skilled people. We are not respecting people who can do good job. And then we say कि education में problem है.
NSTC has some research that says you get a 15% premium if you're skilled, but maybe.
Do they? I don't think so.
Anybody
We
from
place
NSTC here?
40,000 people in jobs every year. We don't see that. Industry का problem है. There was somebody was talking about the MSME का problem जो बता रहे थे. The small industries where a lot of these trained people are going to go are saying कि मैं कहाँ से पैसा दूँ, मैं 2% मार्जिन पे काम करता हूँ और ऊपर से पैसा भी नहीं मिलता है बड़े कॉन्ट्रैक्टर्स से. So where will I, if this person comes to me as a skilled person, I don't think I can give him anything more than what I give others. A person picked up so-called from the street, untrained person, and a person who is trained from ITIs don't necessarily get different salaries. Everything starts at the lowest rung. Yeah, minimum, whatever.
Yeah, minimum or lower. Right. Yeah, that's indeed a problem. But coming back to you, Mr. Mahajan, would you talk a little bit about some of the sectors we should be focusing on when it comes to vocational training? Well, by the way, the problem of respect, right? It's there with the ITI pass outs as well, right? People don't respect people who pass out of ITIs like people respect IITs.
So I already talked about the green sectors, but to take that point a little further, after having made such talks, I said, let me get a little more serious. So, with the inspiration of Vipin Sharma sitting there in Access, I actually drew up a list of 1,000 green skills. Starting with the National Industrial Classification, 10, then 10 in each, you know, 100 green occupations, and in each green occupation, 10 green skills. Let's take, for example, NIC 1 is agriculture. Within that, land development is 1010. Within land development, surveying, soil testing, land valuation, land leveling, all of that. So each of these becomes a full-fledged occupation. And then there are certain skills. So basically, we need as a nation to invest in a whole new green economy. Otherwise, anyway, we are going to destroy ourselves before we become anything significant, because our natural resources are already over deployed and our environment is getting polluted and climate change is showing its effects all the time. And this corona thing that happened is also, its underlying causes are the severe disturbances of the ecosystem. These are all zoonotic diseases, and we basically disturbed the habitats of animals where these viruses lived very happily for millennia. And once those animals had to come out into the other habitats, viruses learned to jump from one species to the other, and that's how we got zoonotic viruses. So it's all man-made interference. And at least in our landmass called India, we should correct it. Because we are blessed with something called monsoon, we are blessed with some of the greatest amount of number of solar days per annum, and we have some of the world's fantastic soils. So we have everything that is necessary to turn our natural environment into the world's greenery in just 5 years. It's not going to take long. Any of you, if you've traveled from Dehradun to Mussoorie, let me tell you that in the 1970s, when Mussoorie had become, when those hills had become known for limestone deposits, they were all completely, you were perhaps in the academy at that time, you would have seen, the whole thing was completely destroyed. You couldn't travel from Dehradun to Mussoorie seeing anything green. Today, when you go there, you can't see anything brown or white. In just 8 to 10 years of work by the Eco Task Force, and of course, lovely rainfall and everything, the whole ecology has been restored. So it can be done in places after place. Second, moving on from green economy, and by the one subset of green is recycling. As we're running out of materials from the earth's bowels, we have to learn to recycle. And there are hundreds and thousands of specific occupations within recycling. For example, there are 18 types of plastics that have to be identified. The average rag picker is seriously skilled in figuring out what is HDPE, what is PPE, what is, different types of plastics, and iska kitna daam milega, iska kitna daam milega, etc., etc. So all those skills need to be added. But the second kind of skills which need to be invested in is digital skills. And by digital, I don't mean software writing. That's one part of it. Let me just give you one example which will be easy for everybody to relate to. We all order things on Amazon, Flipkart. The number of items, SKUs that are listed on Amazon is some 6 million or something, right? Each of those things requires being updated because product specs keep changing, brands keep changing, all of that. But even when they don't need to be updated in terms of the content, they need to be updated to do what's called search engine optimization. Because what is trending in terms of search keeps changing. One day people are looking for men's wristwatches. After a week, it becomes men's gold-plated wristwatches. So if you don't say your gold-plated wristwatches are gold-plated, you get missed out in the SEO. So there's a whole industry which is upgrading these things at the back end. And these jobs can be done by people who are 12th standard pass and who don't know anything about computers. They just get a feed every day on their WhatsApp saying, boss, ye keywords ko dalna hai. It's called stuffing. Huh? You have to stuff the SEO, those keywords. And so there are hundreds and thousands of such digital jobs which we need to sort of develop. The third set of jobs is what I call human sector jobs. Given that our greatest resource is human resource, they all require services. Pallavi just talked about the fact that, due to nuclearization of families, child care has become important, elder care has become important. As the population grows older, 12% of our people are older, we need to provide those human services. So education, health, social services, community care services, all of this requires, again, skilled jobs. The last point, which again Pallavi touched on, is paisa kahan hai? So, paisa nahi hai. We have to stop saying government should spend money on this. Governments are broke. The federal government is kind of so-so, although they also get constantly breaching the fiscal limits under the FRBM. State governments, so they become masters at breaching the FRBM limits and doing off-balance sheet borrowing. In Punjab, for example, 86% of their revenue receipts are pre-committed expenditure. Salaries, pensions, interest payments of past loans. 86%. अब पंजाब के आप फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर बन के 14% से आप क्या करोगे? स्कीम अनाउंस करोगे? It doesn't matter whether it's Akalis or Congress or AAP. So we have to, as citizens, realize that our governments are broke because we've imposed too many impositions, too many of our aspirations on the government. Government doesn't have the money. Our tax to GDP ratio is 15%. But we want services as if our tax to GDP ratio is Scandinavian 40%. So we need to basically, as citizens, learn to pay for some of these things ourselves. And two great examples of this, which have happened in front of our eyes. On micro-entrepreneurship, most of the money comes from people's own savings, right? Self-help group movement was zero in India. Now, last year, there were 1.1 crore self-help groups with 15 crore women members. Last year's disbursement was 66,000 crores. Total microfinance last year was 2,56,000 crores. This is all people's money. This is not Sarkari money. And it's all being repaid, 97, 98%. Second example of how in front of our eyes things that got privatized is take education. And I know Madhav won't like my citing that. But the fact is that hardly any education in India is now Sarkari education. Even where kids go to government schools, as soon as they come back from school, they go for private tuition. The amount of money that households are spending on education, but for private sources, is far higher. So if as citizens we are already paying for these things, then I think we should stop imposing expectations on government कि आप कर दो. सरकार, we should tell सरकार तुम अपना दो चार काम जो ठीक तरह से कर सकते हो वो कर लो और चुप रहो. Let us run our own country.
Mrs.
I actually agree with that. Government should be like, not for the sake of a podium sort of a statement, but it should be like less government. So the government cannot be giving freebies. You cannot be having free things from government. The government should not be in so many roles it is assuming upon itself. I fully agree with you. Yeah.
Mr. Chavan, do you think people will pay for skill training? Because most of our skills trainings are all free, right? Free residential, and whether you talk of state government skilling or central government programs, right? Do you think people will pay?
Which children should pay for it? Children don't pay, parents pay. Now, I do not necessarily disagree with what Vijay is saying or Madam Govil is saying. ऐसा है कि it's all about equity and we are losing everything in the debate. I mean, we have said equity सबके लिए करेंगे, and you are right, the tuition का चक्कर जो है, if you see Eastern India, West Bengal, Assam, Odisha, Bihar, 80% children in government schools go to private tuition. These are our ASER figures. We know this, we have checked it ourselves. The problem is it's not just these kids who are going to the Sarkari school kids. Air-conditioned school kids also go for private tuitions. And I don't understand that. You are spending money. Somebody was telling me 1 lakh rupees a month fees in some school, and then they go to private tuitions. You don't understand. So what is that 1 lakh rupees school doing? Actually, it's a daycare center. And that is, so if we, no, I'm serious actually, very serious about this. I've given talks about this before. Because we need daycare centers. You know, you saw what happened in the pandemic when the school was closed and homes, everybody was at home, the children were there, and the parents had a massive head attack कि बच्चों को अभी दिन भर क्या पढ़ाएं, कैसे करें. So ये करते हैं लोग. So the question is, what is it that we need? Is it possible now, for example, can the children go to private? Why do you need to go to private tuitions and school? आप ऐसा करो, स्कूल में मत जाओ, प्राइवेट ट्यूशन में जाओ और इम्तिहान में बैठ जाओ. ऐसे भी इम्तिहान कोई लल्लू पंजू ऐसे ही होता है ना. एग्जाम्स आर ऑल्सो नॉट सीरियस. सो जो स्किल्स हैं उसके लिए असेसमेंट अलग से हो सकता है. यू हैव टू रीथिंक द होल थिंग. एवरीथिंग इज डिजाइंड thinking that a school will give education, and now we are reaching a point where we know that school is equal to education is not true. It's not true. Because I mean, it requires a separate day, not just a session.
Yeah. All right, great. Let me open it up to the audience. So we have around 5-6 minutes more. Anybody has questions for the panel?
The only agenda of coming to this resilient livelihood, this event, was to see where does sustainability actually feature in resilience. And honestly, I just found Mr. Mahajan talking about it. Everywhere else, it was economic sustainability, a little bit of social sustainability, but in truest form, there was nothing on green, nothing on environment being spoken. And I'd really, really love to talk a lot more after this, but this was just a comment, and I'm really thankful that you did that.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ankit. So talking about the affordability housing, right, that we are talking about that, I see a lot of challenges, right? When we talk about skill development sector, people migrating from home, small towns, right? They move to the city, they don't find livable conditions, they go back, or they see that, okay, maybe I'm doing a job of 5,000, 10,000 rupees per month. I can work in a kapra shop where I can earn the same kind of money. Recently, I was searching house for myself, and I realized that, uh, uh, in a sector in Gurgaon, there's a Unitech Park which was built. There they have EWS housing schemes, right? So just a thought, right? Like it got me thinking, right? That we can have an housing scheme where the money is there with the private sector. I think it's more about how we created a CSR, right? Where we can do certain corporate social responsibility. Can we have a corporate housing responsibility as well, right? Where we talk about, going to the underdeveloped areas, trying to find certain areas, build societies there, but allocate certain part of the societies. A scheme need to be designed. But all I need to say that already exists. Having said that, housing has been a challenge. This is only the tip of the iceberg. The underlying cause is that we are still considering cities for the engine of development. When can we stop doing that? When can we move to the point where we say that Gandhi ji ने बोला था गांव में भारत बसता है. So can we think about that? Can we do the reverse migration from there rather than talking about in cities itself? So that's my 2 cents and thought also. What do you think about that? Is it feasible?
I think what you're saying will found some resonance during the COVID months when there was reverse migration and there was this thought that we need district level job creation. But I think Mr. Mahajan has a perspective on that.
We've all heard of this yojana called smart cities, na? But let's take Gurgaon for example. How smart is that city? उसका पानी जब मर्जी है गुड़गांव में आसपास के जिले वाले बंद कर सकते हैं, उसका दूध बंद कर सकते हैं, उसकी सब्जी बंद कर सकते हैं, उसकी हवा को गंदा कर सकते हैं. बहुत ही स्मार्ट है ये सिटी. What we need is samarth zilas, not smart cities. समर्थ of what? इस चीज में समर्थ के अपने जिले में जो लोग रहते हैं उनको एक डिसेंट लाइवलीहुड सबको मिल सके. So we need actually, by the way, if Gandhiji was alive today, he won't be talking about villages. Gandhiji was a very dynamic thinker. Gandhians are ossified. Gandhiji was very dynamic. If he's around today, he'd be talking about regional planning. You know, he'd be talking about the urban-rural continuum, taking advantage of the fact that both through digital connectivity as well as physical connectivity, we are able to span that distance. But we need to redesign the way we run these things. For example, we have towns, municipal commissioner corporations, we have districts under the district collector. The only place where there's supposed to be a unification of at least planning is under the 74th Amendment. There's a concept called DPDC, District Planning and Development Council. The DPDCs in all but 6 states are defunct. They never even got fully notified. So you can't have integrated planning. Okay? But in the meantime, kya kare? So for the problem that this, by the way, this female LFPR is a serious issue that that we have to sort out. But in the short run, I mean, all the long run solutions you mentioned are there. But in the short run, 3 things will help. One is commuting, Mahila bus service, exclusive Mahila bus service from every kasba to the district towns. 15-20 kilometer dur se to kaam kar sakte. Second is working women's hostels in large numbers in district and larger towns, metros. And the third is creches being compulsory. Like serious violation of labor law if there's no creche in an office or in workplace. You bring just these 3 regulatory requirements, and the first 2, all 3, by the way, in terms of investment, can be taken care of by the private sector. The government just has to make rules. We are not asking government to establish creches or, God forbid, run those Mahila buses, or build those working women's hostels. That can all be taken care of by the private sector. But we do need to create the regulatory regime for that.
I had just one comment to make. I'm Hani Pamnani. I represent NSDC, and you were just mentioning about कि skilling के लिए बच्चा पैसा देगा क्या? Certain.
No, my question was NSDC has a paper that says you get a 15% wage premium if you are skilled.
That is actually, we have certain more evidence to support that, but because we were discussing around those lines, so I just wanted to mention a few points that NSDC is also kind of promoting outcome based and demand led models, where actually we have been promoting models where student is paying only after they get job of a certain salary. Also, the skill impact bond, which is first of its kind in the country. It's also about linking the outcome with the skilling. Also, just would like to mention that there has been a credit line of 5,000 crores being given to NBFCs who would be supporting skill loans in the ecosystem. And that is to develop capacity of the student to pay for the fee. So just because we touched upon that topic, I just wanted to add a comment around that. But really wonderful session. Thank you.
All right.
Which is compulsory deduction of the loan through the salary. If that is legislated,
Yes.
line lag jayegi financiers ki. You know why, for example, auto finance took off in this country before anything else? Because in the Motor Vehicles Act, there was this funda that if the vehicle is on loan, it would be endorsed on the RC book. और RC book के बिना आप गाड़ी बेच नहीं सकते. तो इसलिए अगर आप लोन वापस नहीं किया तो पकड़े जाएंगे.
बिल्कुल.
So exactly the same should they with Aadhaar cards now. If I've taken a loan to get skilled, then whenever I get paid, there's a deduction.